when he was wiping that cow shit on me. It was quite possibly the most turned on I have ever been. You tell me the most recent thought you've had that most people wouldn't say out loud.
I want to Please have sex with me.
This is internet's favorite book to hate.
We love a relationship where he just like owns her, am I right? And he's like, I want her to have all of my babies.
She's writing letters to Ellen DeGeneres. And you want me to take this book seriously? The bar?
I just love a good incest plotline.
What's his name? His name is terrible.
Ryle? That riled me up. Whose name is Ryle?
In hell.
Did find the writing sometimes like borderline cringeworthy.
I don't understand.
Probably the reason why you clicked on this video in the first place. So what? Are 20 million people stupid? Teenage girls in over their heads? Brainwashed? This is where I come in.
I'm here at the behest of a client.
Who?
I don't want to just hate on this book like everyone else, but neither will I give it a free pass, and in the process you will find me
A respectful, quiet, passive observer of the truth.
Author's note. My earliest memory in life was from the age of 2.5 years old. I remember hearing my father yelling, so I peeked out from the other side of the sheet just as my father picked up our television and threw it at my mother, knocking her down. When I decided I wanted to write this story, I first asked my mother for permission. I told her I wanted to write it for women like her. I also wanted to write it for all the people who didn't quite understand women like her. I was one of those people. This is what was going through Colleen Hoover's mind when she sat down to write It Ends With Us. She wanted to answer this little nagging question: why do women stay in physically abusive relationships? And she began this with our main character, Lily, at the top of a building when a stranger, Ryle, enters a rooftop and obliterates a chair in front of her. Little does she know that chair is a foreshadowing. Please, Lily, he says through self-deprecating laughter. Please have sex with me. He's looking up at me with puppy dog eyes and a pathetic, hopeful grin. I want you so, so bad. And I swear once you have sex with me, you will never hear from me again. I promise.
I'm beginning to see a pattern here that I'm not so sure if I like.
Fast forward to a party thrown by Ryle's sister, who happens to be Lily's friend, where Lily finds out that Ryle has a picture of her hanging in the living room. Understandably, she gets angry at him, to which Ryle responds by telling Lily in more than one way,
I want to you.
That's disgusting.
After much argument, serious consideration and discussion, Ryle basically agrees not to use Lily for sex. Why?
Why?
Because
He's a good man, Savannah. A good man.
It's blank.
And then, ladies and gentlemen, enter physical abuse. The first incident between Ryle and Lily in the kitchen is what happened the first time my father ever hit my mother. He pulled the casserole out of the oven without using a pot holder. She thought it was funny and she laughed. The next thing she knew, he had hit her so hard she flew across the kitchen floor. This is the plot twist of the book, because going into it you think it's an everyday cringy romance novel until Ryle hits Lily. And that's where the reader recounts Ryle's behavior and thinks, whoa, so the disgusting ways he behaved was actually supposed to be a red flag? Bringing her flowers, having a photo of her in the apartment, sending her mixed signals, all of it was supposed to be a foreshadowing towards this single point? Colleen Hoover, you're a G. Nah, that disgusting behavior was actually supposed to be romantic. On more than one occasion while writing this, I wanted to change the plotline. I didn't want Ryle to be who he was going to be because I had fallen in love with him in those first several chapters.
The idea of being nice to a woman makes me want to move to an island and live like a hermit for the rest of my life in solitude as punishment.
The way that Ryle behaves in those first several chapters is not something to fall in love with in the first place, which leads me to question what Colleen Hoover's idea of an ideal male is actually. Take November 9, which is a romance story between a girl physically scarred from an incident that set her house on fire and a boy who had set her house on fire in the first place. Slammed is about a love story between a teacher and a student. These are the everyday typical Colleen Hoover male characters. Teachers, arsons,
Marxists, anarchists, agitators, looters, and people who, in many instances, have absolutely no clue.
She
what
set
they are
out to
doing.
write against abusive behavior in It Ends With Us when all her books romanticize abusive behavior in the first place. So then we get this muddled, confused book that is against abuse, whilst containing abusive themes that are not questioned, but instead romanticized. Was Ryle supposed to be written as a physically abusive character? Because he's more than just physically abusive. I mean, come on. Let me give you an example of a better abuser, if you will. Never thought I'd say the sentence in my entire life, but okay, I guess. And Ryle, take notes. But before I do that, let me just preface this video by saying that I'm about to get darker than I've ever gotten in the history of my channel for these 4 years, and that's saying a lot. So, trigger warning for a bunch of stuff. If you want to skip ahead and have your day go better than it will if you continue watching, then yeah, go ahead. Do you? I, however, like to suffer for some reason. So, My Dark Vanessa is a love story between a 14-year-old girl, Vanessa, and a 42-year-old teacher, Strain. Or at least she thinks it's a love story until Vanessa is forced to confront the reality of her past when a wave of women accuse Strain of harassment at the height of Me Too. I'm mad at the world that turned him into a monster when all he did was have the bad luck of falling in love with me. To be groomed is to be loved and handled like a precious, delicate thing. Driven towards him, I was a kind of girl that isn't supposed to exist. One eager to hurl herself into the path of a pedophile. But no, that word isn't right, never has been. It's a cop-out, a lie, in the way that it's wrong to call me a victim and nothing more. How do you get a 32-year-old woman to think like this? Well, it starts with a 14-year-old girl. And why a 14-year-old girl, you might ask? It is because in the middle of your adolescence, you're the bravest you'll ever be because of how the brain works at that age. The combination of malleability and arrogance. Because we've all heard it. The moment that a girl turns 10 years old, her life is over, or her life has begun. She's now a woman, a real thing, or an unreal thing, a witch, a monster, a deadly weapon, a crime scene, an angel, a demon, ruthless, conniving, monstrous. She's no longer a human but a myth. Girls become real so early, 14, 15, 16. That's when your minds turn on. It's a gorgeous thing to witness. But how do you get your hand on that thing? That thing with insatiable flesh walking on two legs into a classroom? If she's 14 years old, then you're in luck because of, malleability and arrogance. Even better if she's in a boarding school with no parents around to protect her and no friends to warn her. And even better if she feels worthless and vulnerable. Then you can sink your teeth into her flesh just fine because that is the perfect victim. But first, we must tread slowly with words. Language is what shapes us as human beings. It helps us understand ourselves and what we feel. Get lonely out there. For a moment, I'm dumbstruck. Even though lonely isn't a word I'd ever use to describe how it feels living out there deep in the woods. Hearing Mr. Strange say it now makes me think it must be true. Probably has always been true. The last thing I want is to overstep. Overstep. I'm not sure what he means by that either. He suddenly seems both embarrassed and hopeful. Like if I told him this wasn't okay, he might start to cry. So I smile, shake my head, you're not. This is how you fundamentally change the identity of a human being. And when your identity changes, so does your reality. Upon giving her a copy of Lolita, Vanessa describes it as, it's a story of a seemingly ordinary girl who is really a deadly demon in disguise and a man who loves her. Reality changes with words, and if we want to abuse this girl, then we have to change her reality to the story of a teacher who, against his will, just had the bad luck of falling in love with a little girl. The story of a teacher against a society bent on criminalizing him just for the fact that he fell in love. And what a wonderful story that is. This entire plan goes to waste without this essential ingredient. You have to make her dependent on you. And how do you make an insecure, lonely, vulnerable girl to depend on you? What do you write? Poems mostly. They're not good or anything. I'd like to read some of your work. My brain catches on the way he says your work, as though the things I write are worth taking seriously. Now, dear reader, I want you to think about being a girl living in a boarding school without her parents for the first time, unable to fit in, starved for praise and protection, only for someone to charge in and fill that void with his presence, and then for that presence to go away. It is basically the same as suffering withdrawal from a drug. This is what Strain does to her afterwards. He takes back everything he gave her, and she realizes that she needs him. And just like with any drug, she's willing to do whatever it takes to have him, the drug, back. This is where the subtle manipulative demands begin. After using the word sex in the classroom, to her shocked reaction, he tells her, I expected the rest of them to be scandalized, but not you. I was starting to wonder if I'd been wrong about you. My breath catches at the thought of being so close to a serious misstep. One wrong reaction on my part could wreck this whole thing. And why does her breath catch at failing this test, wrecking this whole thing? Because she needs him. All of this that I mentioned grooms her to this point right here. So what is it that you want to do? He asks. It's too big of a question. What I want depends on what he wants. I don't know. I like being with you, I say. He waits for me to offer more, and my eyes move around the classroom as I struggle for the right words. I also like what we do. What do you mean, what we do? He wants me to say it, but I don't know what to call it. Swiveling slightly in the chair, I say that we might, I don't know, kiss or something. The difference between rape and sex is a state of mind. These are Vanessa's words, and they're utterly wrong because a state of mind can be manipulated into fruition. Vanessa's therapist tries to make her understand this. Gently, she says, if you think back to the first incident. No, I can't. I throw my head against the back of the chair, press myself into the cushion. I can't go back there. You don't have to go back, she says. You can stay in the room. When you look back on that first memory, who was the initiator, you or him? In that moment, Vanessa is transported back in time to that classroom where she sat in front of Strain at the seminar table. My eyes drift to the window and spot something red. Squinting, I see a balloon, its string caught on a bare branch of the maple tree. It floats in the breeze, knocking against leaves and bark. Then Mr. Strain's knee touches my bare thigh, right below the hemline of my skirt. At the seminar table, 9 heads bow in concentration. Out the window, a red balloon hangs limp from a tree limb. In this moment, Vanessa should rage, roar, ravage, and yet she does nothing. And you wonder why, Vanessa, why? Elizabeth Russel, the author, sneaks the answer into the text in the form of a red balloon. In this moment, Vanessa is experiencing what some victims go through in moments of deep trauma. They're in a state of pain so acute that they escape the body that is being unendurably violated in some fundamental way. I leave the room too, but I'm not part of them. They're the same, but I'm unchanged. I'm unhuman now, untethered. While they walk across campus earthbound and ordinary, I soar, trailing a maple red comet tail. As a reader, I was irrevocably changed by the scene, but as a writer, I was mesmerized by the impeccable writing. The reason why this scene is so poignant is because Elizabeth Russel is able to bring us into the skin of this girl, paralyzed. She doesn't outright say that Vanessa is going through a trauma response. Instead, she shows us, through a motif, the balloon caught in the bough of a tree, something that It Ends With Us fails to do innumerable times. The main character in that book is a florist, and hence her name is Lily Blossom Bloom. How more on the nose can you possibly get? The subject of It Ends With Us is so powerful that the reader is forced to forgive the writer's laziness. The subject is powerful and unique in the sense that there are very little books about abuse out there. Books about a woman in her early 20s going through domestic violence. It fulfilled a need that was out there for the subject that wasn't being fulfilled. However, the book relies on the subject matter of abuse for credibility and shock value rather than its own talent. When writing about abuse, you should be worthy of the dark subject that you're talking about. When writing about an abusive character, you are in an incredibly responsible position because it can have detrimentally harming effects if you don't do it right. Strain is a more reliable study of abusers in real life, not Ryle. The thing that sets Colleen Hoover apart in the romance genre is that she brings abuse into her stories. The thing that sets her books apart does not give her any merit as a writer. I have to give Colleen Hoover credit for the way that she portrayed the psychology of the abused woman in the book. I no longer wondered why women stayed in physically abusive relationships after reading it. I'm no longer myself. I'm no one. I'm a red balloon caught in the boughs of a tree. I am nothing at all. He touched her and she was erased, wrung hollow of whatever she knew herself to be. She was nothing, and so she had to give herself something. So she built a story to protect herself, a love story. I exhale, hang my head, I can't. That's fine, she says, take it slow. I just feel... I press the heel of my hands into my thighs. I can't lose the thing I've held on to for so long, you know. My face twists up from the pain of pushing it out. I just really needed to be a love story, you know? I really needed to be that. I know, she says, because if it isn't a love story, then what is it? For Lily, in It Ends With Us, if it isn't a love story, then it is the story of her father whom she had watched beat her mother, and her mother who let him. But it's not. It can't be that. His hand is hurt, and he still doesn't care about it, even though his job depends on it. So it's a love story. He hurt me because he thought I was cheating on him. So it's a love story. It's a love story. It's a love story. If it isn't a love story, then it is the story of a grown man who took away all of you from the age of 14. Then it is the story of a girl who was manipulated, groomed, brainwashed, hurt. If it isn't a love story, then it is the story of a man who doesn't love you but instead is hurting you. The story of a man who's taking advantage of you, and the story of a woman who is being taken advantage of. Tipping my head back, I say he was so in love with me. Vanessa, she says gently, you didn't ask for that. You were just trying to go to school. But I only see myself, barely 16, with tears in my eyes, standing in front of a room of people, calling myself a liar, a bad girl, deserving of punishment. I tortured him, I say. I don't think you understand how much I contributed to everything. His whole life descended into hell because of me. He was a grown man and you were 15, she says. What could you have done to torture him? For a moment I'm speechless, unable to come up with an answer besides, I walked into his classroom. I existed. I was born.